Okay, so I would take the opening thoughts of my panelists on this. First, towards an improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process. But the key word here is the youth. And I'm sure from this morning, as we've had a conversation, the fact that the youth board that we have in Africa and in Ghana could be a risk and also could be an opportunity, depending on how we look at it. So we always say we have a youth population. So the underlying factor here is the youth. So I will start with Dr. Ernest Daffo. Towards an improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process. So 4 underline youth engagement, involvement, legislative. So let's say your opening thoughts.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. All right. Thank you, Duke. Good afternoon, everyone here. I think towards an improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process is a topic that over the years we've been involved in trying to bridge the gap. Actually, there is a challenge. And if you look at globally, even the challenge is such that is why we are even treating it today. You see, there is a gap. What about if you also elect older people to parliament? Can't they also do the same job as the youth will do? So over the years in Ghana, it has been improving, where in the last parliament, that is the 6th parliament, we elected 44 persons, they were youth. In this parliament, the figure is around 70. Which is an improvement. With regards to engagement of the youth, looking at the youth as a critical point, because the youth represent about 58% of the voter population of about 5 million. They constitute a critical mass, and their issues with education, social welfare, employment and all that constitute a chunk of the issues that we Parliament debate and then take decisions on. So their engagement is really, really critical. And how do we do this? Over the period, Parliament has in it toolkits, lots of instruments through which the youth can participate or engage with Parliament in whatever activities that will take place there. But I think the problem is either we youth are not really aware of those processes to use, or we ourselves are disinterested in politics or in the way Parliament performs its activities. As the discussion goes on, I will end here and then allow my other panelists to also say, but we'll come back to the issue and we will try to see where the problem is and then take it forward. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Daffo has identified 2: lack of awareness with regards to the structures through which the youth can contribute to policy and to the legislative process. And the second, lack of interest. Dr. Daffo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Duke, for the opportunity. I was telling Samson a short while ago that if I should die today, I think I will find favor with my maker because I've paid my dues, isn't it? I've trained more than 10,000 graduates in this country. Some of them are MPs and ministers of states and so on. I'm happy the way you are performing, meaning that you took your lessons very well. There was a time that one minister was contesting me one studio, and I had to draw his attention to some of the scripts I had marked and some of the reading materials I had given him that he had not read very well. For which reason he was contesting my position. But I guess, so thank you very much for this unique opportunity. Very important, the youth, people have said that yes, the future belongs to the youth. But the critical question is, how is the youth being nurtured and how prepared are they? I've always argued that enthusiasm alone doesn't grow food. You may want to, plant cassava, but do you have the know-how? You may be very enthusiastic, but do you have the know-how? It is important that we build the capacity of the youth. Some apprenticeship is almost always important. There's this conventional wisdom is that practice makes man perfect, isn't it? But I would argue that practice does not always make man perfect. But lack of practice can always or will always lead to a degeneration. You getting the drift? So my argument is that yes, we are operating a system which must exhibit high level of transparency, high level of accountability. I was brought to the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs to look at how we can really harmonize the relationship between two of the most important organs of state, the executive and the legislature. And my argument has always been that if these two institutions will work very well, this country will develop. Of course, we go to court to seek redress among others. But if public policies were renewed to the benefit of you and I, we'll make progress. If leaders will be interested in the well-being of all of us and will not be just short-termists, just interested in here and now and the self, but are interested in what posterity will gain from the policies and programs, we'll make a lot of progress. And as you know, you are in Legon Hall, as Deputy Senior Tutor of Legon Hall in charge of maintenance, you can see the ambience, isn't it? You see the ambience when I took over. Because I want to leave a legacy that I'll be proud of. That's important. We say Parliament is a congress of opinions. So Parliament performs a number of functions. Lawmaking is important. All over the world, parliaments make laws. And lawmaking and then policy making, the two, they shade into each other, they dovetail into each other. So lawmaking shades imperceptibly into policy making. Usually, when you have the policy, you can deduce the law out of the policy to make that policy implementable. They represent all of us. So I have an MP. So all of you do have MPs wherever you come from. Except that these days, when you ask even some of our students who their MPs are, they can't tell us. Where do you live? They say Abokobi. Who is your MP? I said 10, minus 10 in the exam that is coming. So they offer representation. We cannot be in the Greek city-states where all male adults will participate in the decision-making process. We have a representative democracy. So we have to vote for somebody to be in parliament so that I can be in a classroom or be in the ministry. You can be wherever you are. That is what we call division of labor in politics. So that's why when you are voting, you are not just voting for anybody. You are voting for somebody who can exercise what we call mature judgment. Yes, Parliament itself must also be, as I said, a congress of opinions. And when we talk of congress of opinion, that is where ideas are nurtured and ideas are contested. So certainly you need to be able to elect somebody, for instance, who can articulate the concerns of his or her constituents. Aggregation of those interests and then articulation. About the number of things that they do. And that is why sometimes if it comes, it has to be budget, a sign of treaties, and all of that. So in Ghana, if you look at what we have done under the Fourth Republic, what we say is that government business or legislative business is government business. Because most of the issues that are dealt with in Parliament is actually executive business. So how do we engage Parliament, for instance? And one of my objectives will be to enhance the dignity of Parliament and make sure that Parliament itself exhibit high level of transparency. Parliament must be closer to the people, so people can appreciate what Parliament does. What are the processes of lawmaking, for instance? How are bills drafted from the drafting stage? What is it that must be in the bill? Is it a memorandum that might accompany the bill, must spell out certain things? What are the key, what do we call it, lacuna? What are the existing problems in the existing laws? What is the new law coming to do? What are the key remedies and so on and so forth? When the bill is read, first reading, you go through second, of course, it's sent to the various committees. What is the capacity of the various committees? Because that is where the real business is. Somebody said the devil is in the details. That's where they look at that. That is why some have argued that Parliament in session is really Parliament at public exhibition. But Parliament in the committee rooms is a real Parliament at work. That is where the real Woodrow Wilson, that's what he said. So that is where the nitty-gritty of the lawmaking is that the amendments are done. Then it comes to back to the floor. By way of the second reading, of course, then you go to the consideration stage where people then are going to contest the various clauses and whether those clauses really can stand the test of time. And then before maybe the president will assent, maybe either going through the processes, whether it's with lightning speed or whatever, depending on the exigencies of the times. So the engagement will mean that one, Parliament itself must be open. You understand? If you want to engage me, I myself must be engageable. We are quote and unquote. I must be, susceptible to the influence and so on and so forth. I was reading a parliamentary Hansard when they were passing, I think is it that this bill about generals?
Affirmative action.
Not affirmative action. The domestic violence bill. When some of the MPs were angry that some advocacy groups were in Parliament lobbying them to pass that bill. And in fact, that day I was mad that this MP doesn't know what he's talking about. So you're an MP and somebody is advocating that a particular policy should be done or a particular law should be enacted, and you are angry that you are being stampeded. It is part of the democratic process. What we need to know is that in democracy you can't pick and choose. We go full hog. Transparency is fundamental. So Parliament must be open. People must be educated about the processes and so on, so they can interface. The youth themselves must build the capacity to be able to interact and be able to engage. I have always argued that you cannot give what you do not have. So going forward as a people, I think that we need to continue to dialogue and build more capacity. The capacity building will be part of the education, part of the training processes. We're talking to a colleague and I said that in this country, it shouldn't be that, like somebody who wrote to me some time ago about a wife who had delivered, that, and the letter was very simple that said, I need some emergency loan because all of a sudden my wife had delivered. That's a crisis situation. But I said, but your wife was pregnant for 9 months. You understand? All of a sudden my wife had delivered. That's a crisis situation. What it means is that there has not been any prior preparation, isn't it? So how are we prepared, for instance, to take advantage? And be careful. It's also always important to build capacity and take your time to be able to learn and apprenticeship and be able to serve. Some of us served. After a point, we are still serving, but we are also being served. You understand? I don't know, but I think I should be the youngest chief director around. Because the senior minister was saying that, oh, you are too young to be here. But when we had engagement with the core leadership of Parliament, and I moderated, he said, you are not a young man. That's what the senior minister said. So we need to build capacity. And we need to encourage our institutions to open up. When you go to other jurisdictions, I did some studies at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston. Look, you have lecturers who have been at the UN for 7 years, they have come back to academia, and so they have engaged in all kinds of practice. So when they are teaching you, there's a nexus between theory and practice. Here, when you go close to any institution, they see you as a demon. You are coming to undermine their very existence. So we need to move away from this mentality and try and open up so that there will even be a nexus. In the process, we'll build the capacity, or even the teachers, so we can mentor our kids going forward. And I believe that they have all kinds of potentials. I have taught in the University of Ghana for at least about 15 years, so I know that you have capacity. I've trained people who are doctors now, so I know. And so going forward, I would suggest that we need to continue to deepen the participation, deepen the engagement, build the capacity of the youth, encourage the leadership of Parliament, and the current speaker was my teacher in Lagos, so we have that personal rapport. And when I was the postal president, he was our patron, so I worked with him even in the university. So now I can even go to his house, where we'll continue to deepen the engagement and open up Parliament as far as practicable, so that the youth can have access. You understand? Have access and build their capacity, so that when you become an MP, you will not say that all of a sudden I'm an MP and I don't know what to do. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We'll come back. Yes.
Yeah, so let's move to the next level. Let me speak to MPs and young MPs for that matter. I start with you, Dr. Kubo. For you, what are the critical challenges for a young person who believes that he has the skill, the ideas, and above all the competence to contribute to national development? One, what are the challenges for you? And then secondly, as someone who is in Parliament now, what do you see as some of the challenges that prevent, people, they may just have ideas, memoranda, things that they want to just contribute to make the discussion richer and broaden the frontiers of policy and the law. What is hindering these actions from taking place? So 2 questions, more than one.
Thank you very much. Let me say that when our senior lecturer was talking about making a few years, what came to mind what came to mind straight away was one advice I had when I tried to compete at the primaries in our party, where one uncle came to me and said, "Oh, you are a young man, just started to work for some few years now as a doctor." So the way we perceive the practice of politics, or how politicians are, or what we are doing itself, is a very huge hindrance to people who want to partake or part. But what the country is at any moment is a reflection of what Parliament is. And the reason is very simple. If there is chaos in the country and a particular sector is not doing well, let's take the church. Well, now, I've had to go out and say that just in the house, or next to the house, a small space that somebody builds a church. One man church, they start singing, and they are doing a lot of things unregulated. So people can't see, and they can't report it. I also cannot go and chase the people out. Otherwise, people say that this is very nice. But with the law, when people sit at the table and consider a particular law, which tells the distance between which a church must be in a residential area, which tells what time you can pay, and when you need to seek permission or the consent of citizens, then all these nuisance or problems will happen will go down. So once that persists, it tells you in Parliament it has not been thought of, or somebody has not taken attention of it. So this can, whatever problem we have is as a result of a law which is not working well, or an absent law, a law which has not yet come. And that is very, very crucial. I was in Germany some few years ago, we were at the central station. We said we were going to do evangelism with some people guys. And the weather was very cold, so we went inside the train station. The policeman came and said, "We want to see our payment. Before you go and evangelize, you need a payment." And they do so because they know some people can use that to abuse others. They can harass others. So we showed our payment. And the payment showed that we were supposed to gather. But the payment that stated that we were supposed to gather outside the station, not inside the station. And it was warm inside. That's why we were inside. So we had to go outside. And then after some time we went home. So what it means that even with religion, their parliamentarians have sat down, look at all the issues that can arise, and then after once there is no law, there's chaos. So that's just an example. Now let me come straight to the obstacles. The first one, unfortunately, is this our culture that if you are not 55 or 60, you don't have much to offer in terms of experience, knowledge, and the wisdom. People ascribe or equate age, longevity, with wisdom. So when you come up and try to be part of the political process, even though there are positions that you can handle, that cultural trait alone becomes a barrier for you. So you need to do extra work to prove that you can be trusted to be voted for to lead a constituency to an election, or you can be trusted to go and advise people on how to organize a program, or you can be trusted to counsel people who are having conflict within the organization which you are. So that cultural orientation is a problem. I think I don't want to bother you, young leaders across the world now. Most places, if you look at Macron is not an old man, but he is doing quite well. Some old men are doing very bad. I don't want to mention them. And so that is a problem here. 2 days ago, I spoke to some doctors on some issue at Parliamentary. One lady, after all our talks, said, "Oh, we announced that the culture of the university. How is this young man coming from?" After our chat, I think I like you. I want you to introduce me very much. So even with a physician who has studied a lot, and he's also young, she's young as well. She still has the problem when a young man was going to come check. It was all her life. She's used to see, she said, I'm used to see old gray-haired men coming to check. So that's the problem. The second one is finance. Unfortunately, my biggest issues as an MP is not how to contribute meaningfully in Parliament, or how to write some statements, or how to help shape policy on my committee. I help select control help. In Parliament we have committees, and the committee allows you to use a particular skill orientation to help a particular sector of the country. So if you are on the health committee, all health issues come under your jurisdiction. So that one is fine. Now, if it comes to organizing people, explaining issues to them, what is happening in Parliament, national issues, community work, it's also fine. The only problem is where in Ghana, when you are a leader or a politician, you are seen as the one who should take care of everything. So people come to you when their children are going to school fees. People come to you when they are sick. The last time, one of my very key lieutenants was very unwell. And I needed to give him some medication. 3 days later, I was called by the wife. No, not the wife, by the daughter. I was critically ill. I had to drive with my car, pick him from home, wait for him to pack, put him in my vehicle, take him to the hospital, pay for his medication, write the plan, and when he got to I had to take him home. The wife was not bothered. She didn't take any step to take the man home. Once he works with the politician, that's his job. And if you are not going to do that because of this, you can tell the whole community that you are insensitive and you can lose your position and you don't have a project to save anymore. So this is the kind of burden that a politician has. So finances when you are in the office, and before getting to the office, to run a campaign is not easy. And not easy when you get to the top. You can solicit, but you must have some foundation. You know, people can give you all. And I remember when I was going to my race, I had to go for a loan. The reason is that I made some calculations, what I had, what I was expecting from others. And then one day I was like, look, if these others don't come, I'll be in trouble. So I need to get some baseline. And the baseline had to come with my initial scores, like what I had in terms of my fiscal ability, plus the loan. Now, that is how difficult it is. If you go and mention to someone that, can you help me to get the baseline? When I say the baseline, the minimum you need to do something. The first thing they will say is that, but we told you you're a young man, you should not do it. You need some time, you understand? But the youth have a lot to offer. And if the financial barrier is taken care of, it can help. And when I was in tech, I was just as a vice president. When we were exiting, when I saw what was happening in campus, I said, this country is in trouble. Because if you look at the materials alone used for campaigning at the university, you ask, where do you get this money from if you are not working, you are a student? You know, so we must have laws like they do in other countries, where how much you put in is even regulated. You are going for primaries as a national chairman, your postage should be maximum 100. If we see 150 posters, you are in trouble. We must use laws to remove some of our barriers. But if it's a free-for-all, then you are in trouble. And very soon, this our parliament will have a lot of people who have so much money, but unfortunately have little to offer. Because without money, And it's sad. Even most of our voters tell you, you have a lot of problems, but you have money. So I see people tell me, you are doing well, but money is important. And some of them say, okay, you are ready, so we'll allow you to go. But this time, if you call me, no man, you know this time, government is strong. So some of the sympathies you have, it will come down. So these are some of the
interesting perspective from Dr. Bernardo Kogoi. Now we'll go to Dr. Zaneto now. But Dr. Kogoi mentioned that for him, in general, the perception of politics itself is a huge value. But obviously, I don't think you have had that challenge because you belong into one of the most powerful families, seeing politics being practiced, growing up. I don't think the perception was a barrier anyway, and especially the means by which we came into the political life. It was as a result of trying to attend to the plight of people in the aftermath of the June 3rd disaster. So the same question to you. The challenge of getting into Parliament and the challenge of getting others, the important demographic of the youth, to contribute to us shaping policy and law.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I think I'm very confident. Prof was my lecturer when I did my master's in Brazil and conflict teams. So we know each other quite well. And I have a lot of respect for him because he reminds me of the days when it mattered that you had a manicured garden if you had a garden. It mattered that you painted your walls. You didn't leave it for someone else to do. And I felt really encouraged hearing him speak about the changes he made in the University of Ghana. And anyway, so it's great to be here. I'm honored to be here. And it's nice to finally meet you. I saw you when I was sitting in the back bench, and I was wondering when I was going to have a chance to meet you. So it's good to see you as well. Each other well. We've been working together with the speaker, and we finally have managed to get a June in Parliament to at least try and make sure that parliamentarians don't die from stress-related diseases if they can be helped. Incidentally, stress is one of the main issues that contributes towards high blood pressure and all the illnesses that a lot of parliamentarians end up with, even during their first term in office. This is the unseen part of being in Parliament. Most people what they think is the glamour. There's this perception of parliamentarians getting all sorts of things. But as Dr. Kubo has mentioned, it's not glamorous. There's a lot of pressure, and there's actually not enough wiggle room for you to manage with this new culture of money that's just gotten way out of hand. I suppose one of my biggest concerns that we have is perhaps a need for us to make the center of everything ethical leadership. It's not enough to talk about leadership in isolation. We need to talk about ethical leadership. Because if we're talking about good governance, what is it that guides us? What do we see ourselves as Ghanaians? What are our core values that we live by? What are the things that we use to judge who is considered a good leader? If it's about populism, it doesn't necessarily translate into good governance. Populism is great. If a person is popular, it helps because they bring in the votes. And then what? We must think beyond the excitement and the immediate justification, the immediate fulfillment and gratification to beyond now. And when it comes to issues of populist promises that are made during the campaign trail, how do we as the people, the population of Ghana, the electorate, how do we help to keep politicians on the straight and narrow, even in the face of making promises to come into office? Because the reality is, the majority of the time, the electorate knows when the particular politicians are making promises that they can't keep. But we still go with it anyway, and then we vote people in, and then they let us down, and then we complain that they're not fulfilling their promises that we knew they couldn't fulfill. bill. So somewhere along the line, we need to draw the line on how far we veer into the gray area when we're making promises regarding the future of the country, because whoever gets voted in, whether it's as members of parliament or in the executive, they're there to do what will be in the highest interest of Ghana. And as Dr. Evans Agri just mentioned, Evans Agri said, because we can't all be part of that direct decision-making process, the people who we elect to represent us must have our highest interest at heart. And it mustn't be purely about their satisfaction of their personal ambitions or their immediate satisfaction of their financial considerations. It must be beyond that, in terms of what the next generation is going to reap from what we're sowing today. And just as an aside, a few days ago I was in Akusumo, and the Akusumo Dam is a testament to Kwame Nkrumah's legacy. The Temamoto Way is a testament to his legacy. At this point, there should be 4 lanes on either side of that. Can we only blame the government for the fact that the land that should be used for this has been encroached? There are very obvious people who have encroached on this land. So in talking about governance, it's also about the self, the individual. You want me to pause for you to...
Let's wrap up the point.
You can't tell me to wrap up when you gave everybody else a chance. See how women are suffering. It's very real. That issue is very real.
Okay, so
And,
the point I was making is that you make a submission and then eventually you want to. That's what I was saying. I'm a milk
turning some of us into a little bit slightly quarrelsome people because you have to just be a bit louder so that you don't drown in all the, this is actually very much in support of the women in parliament. And that in itself is a major challenge that we have. That's a major challenge because, we've been talking about this affirmative action bill for the longest time. But I think, and don't get me wrong, I am not against having women equalized in terms of the numbers, because in reality, the women are more in terms of population. But we should also aim not just to fill slots, but to build capacity. And that's not to say that all the men who are there are the best qualified either. So we're looking at a very complex issue that goes to the root of our psyche as a people. When we're talking about the affirmative action thing, we're talking about gender and blah, blah, blah. You have programs where there's an issue on gender and the room is full of women. And I'm thinking, why are we preaching to the choir? We know what our problems are. So we've kind of reached the point where we raise the issue of gender, which is both men and women, but in a country where women are still trying to, reach that kind of a bit of a level ground with the men, it's veered more towards an issue of women. And in order to actually help to mainstream this issue, we need the men on board. And there's no benefit in sidelining the men or making it seem as if the boy child is less important. I think what we need to do is to also talk about the negatives and the positives as well, and also highlight the value of having more women on board. And during the course in conflict, peace, and security, one of the interesting findings is that when you have women as part of a peace-building group, as part of a conflict resolution group, you see better results and longer-lasting peace. So it's not something that we are trying to push just for the mere sake of saying fewer men and more women. There is value in having women at the center of the decision-making process as well. And as Dr. Agri's namesake at some point, Agri in the past, said, when you educate a man, you educate an individual. When you educate a woman, you educate a nation, a community. And it's also, we all know the values that our mothers, our aunts, our grandmothers have played in our lives and how it touches on the lives of more people. So in doing so, what we're trying to do is build a more resilient nation in getting the women involved. So for me, the gender issue is something that is really important. And I'm not a feminist. I didn't grow up being told that I couldn't do something because I was female, or that I should only do something because I was female, or given favor because I was female. So there again, in talking about gender sensitization, it's not only the men who need to be sensitized, women do as well. Because I did not have to fight within the family because I was a girl. I did something because I was told I could. And the fact that I was a female was never the issue. And so in my case, that was something that I had to make myself more aware of, because not every woman has that opportunity. So these are things that are very real for all of us. And as part of trying to bring the issue of gender sensitization into the country, we also need sensitization of the parliamentarians. So Doc, this one is heavily on your shoulders. It's a great concern regarding the sensitization of all MPs with regards to gender. And but I think truly for us to look at good governance and in terms of the youth, looking at our education from the very beginning, it shouldn't be learning English for the sake of learning English. How does it apply to the future of the country? It shouldn't be just learning cultural studies just for the sake of cultural studies. What is the context in which we learn? And at the university level, not in isolation, how does it come to bear within the gaps in the employment of the employment or the economic sector or the private sector? We have what is supposed to be a growing oil and gas sector. Do we have the capacity to fill the slots there? Because if we don't, we're talking about potential jobs, which the Ghanaians will not end up filling because we don't have the capacity. So all these are important in the process of getting the youth involved towards the legislative and governance of Ghana. So that would be
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Zanaton. Interesting, very, very interesting perspective. So she got in the really the essence of the process of her presentation was joined by the Honorable Samuel Kuchaba, a member of Parliament from Lifton, minority spokesperson. As I said it the last time, but probably still holds the record as the youngest ever person to be appointed deputy minister in the country. So that's Samuel Kuchaba. We're having a discussion towards improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process. Now, speaking to your colleagues and members of Parliament on two things. First, the challenges, and probably you will have different insights, because both of them are first area. He's a secretary. So, in terms of experience of navigating the House, he's working on PX and that is what. So, the question is, the political challenge you face as a young person getting into Parliament, that's one. And then two, the difficulties associated with the youth generally getting to engage with the lawmaking process, the policy consideration, and getting the input across.
Thank you very much, Duke. And let me begin by conveying my deepest regrets for joining you rather late. I was asking colleagues at the front desk what happened to my invitation, because I was surprised to get here and realize that you have started. My invitation says 2 p.m., so I showed it to them. And so they admitted that the mistake must have come from them. I don't want to believe it's sabotage. If we were in Parliament, if we were in Parliament, I will have said, Mr. Speaker, Honorable boy must have sabotaged. So please forgive me, no fault of mine. It's a very important day, and my lecturer is here. I would not want to come after my lecturer has taken his seat. But let me commend previous speakers. I've really enjoyed the brief remarks as I met the Honorable Dr. Zaneto Rawlings speak very forthright and very frank. Duke, the question you asked me, I must be very honest that I consider my trajectory into national politics a rather fortunate path. and especially my entry into Parliament. I am not going to kid myself and say that that is the normal path. It is not. I became deputy minister, as you rightly said, at the age of 28. Before I went to Parliament, I went to Parliament upon reaching 32. So I had served my first 4 years in government as only a deputy minister, but not a member of Parliament. In my second term in the executive as deputy minister of education, I wore 2 hats as deputy minister of education and a member of Parliament. But I ask myself every day, if I had not had the opportunity to be a deputy minister of information, would it have been that smooth or easy to get into Parliament? It wasn't all rosy, I must admit. We were serving as retirees, pensioners as they were called during the campaign. But yes. But I must admit that because I served as deputy minister of information, I had some leverage, I had some name recognition, I had some face recognition, and my constituents felt that okay, he had been tried and tested. But that's not the normal trajectory for the everyday person who wants to go into Parliament. So I must concede from the get-go that my story is not the norm. However, if you go back to when I was on campus and right from student politics, I rose to become president of the National Union of Ghana Students. From first year, I was press secretary of the SRC. I was very active in extracurricular activities. I mean, you will find me in every leadership position, more or less. I was the editor-in-chief of the SRC magazine, Commonwealth magazine, which I enjoyed most of all the positions I held, because the Commonwealth magazine, you can print everything you want with very, very limited editorial discretion. I then became press secretary of the SRC, General Assembly member. And I think all of those were good learning experiences. So for young people who want to come into politics, who have the desire to serve in higher office, in national office, I think it is good to start early. Perhaps if I had not availed myself to all of these leadership positions within the Students Representative Council and the National Union of Ghana Students, it would have been very difficult for Professor Mills at the time, though having served as lecturer for almost 3 decades, he had some extraordinary confidence in the youth, in the students. But at least you should have something to show that, okay, you have had a go at leadership, no matter how small. And it does not even have to be elected office. These days there are so many courses that young people can take up. We skew the leadership debate in this country to make it look as though if you didn't stand for JCR or SRC or MOOCs president, then you are not a leader, or you do not have anything to offer. Everybody cannot be in elected leadership positions, but everybody can exercise leadership depending on the courses that you take on. There are so many courses, even whilst you're on campus, out of campus, that you can take on to, as it were, achieve certain results. And they are all as good as those who may be in mainstream, leadership positions. So, yes, I had a more unique path entering into Parliament. But to answer the second part of the question, which has to do with experiences, when you enter Parliament that year, only recently on the 25th of July, for the first time, the Parliamentary Youth Week was inaugurated by Mr. Speaker. And the current Speaker has to be commended. He has a lot of confidence in young people, and he encourages us to speak up on the floor. And often you see him calling young first-time MPs when they are up, and Duke is a parliamentary correspondent who can confirm that. So the 25th of July, the Interparliamentary Union requires that member nations form the Young Parliament Union as part of the IPU. And ours was inaugurated, Mr. Speaker himself inaugurated. And I was pleasantly surprised to realize that there are currently at least 71 MPs below the age of 40 in Parliament. And that's really impressive. And I think that I have greater company now in this 7th Parliament than I had in the 6th Parliament, where the youth numbers. Well, I didn't say that. You know, so but I would say that it also depends on your attitude. If you have the right attitude, you have to, you know, our culture. We are a very conservative society. So don't arrive in Parliament saying, oh, you know, I have my own achievements, I have my own background, I've also, you know, been a master of all I have surveyed. If you enter Parliament with that attitude, you won't succeed. You must admit that there are many before you, and you want to submit yourself to learning. You want to understand the process. You want to be tutored. So what I did was to align myself with seniors who will open up to me. So the likes of Honorable Haruna Idrisu, Honorable Mahama Ayeriga, at committee, the Honorable Osewusu, who we call Joe Weiss, he served on the transport committee with me, and he had the unique advantage of being chief executive of DVL in his other life. And so he had a lot of practical experiences to share. And that is how come I was able to make an impact at committee level, where a lot of the parliamentary business occurs. Sadly, the cameras are not there, so you don't see how we work together, the camaraderie, the bond that exists. It's when we come to the committee of the whole, and the cameras are on us, and we know that our supporters are watching. You have to make sure you make your point rather forcefully, and you don't want to take prisoners in the process. But that helped me a lot to fit in and to learn the ropes. But personal studies too helps, because it's quite a technical environment. The standing orders ought to be mastered, so you need to master the standing orders. So you must make time for personal studies. You must make time for personal research. And here I must also reveal that I had quite an interesting background with my national service. I did my national service in Parliament, the research department. So that came in handy. And I was not a national service personnel who was always, not excited, not passionate. I loved it. It was a great opportunity. And I really submerged myself in it. And there's hardly any Hansard or any official report that I did not read. So all of that background helped. So it comes back to the point that no matter where you find yourself today, you do not know how that experience will come in handy in the near future. So make the best of it. And when you get there, you find out that it does help you. In terms of what I have seen in championing the youth agenda, because our theme is towards an improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process, I must be brutally frank at this session that the youth in our country have not engaged Parliament well enough. I have to be brutally frank. I see how other entities engage Parliament, other bodies engage Parliament. I don't see youth groups engage Parliament that way. When I served on the Transport Committee in the 6th Parliament, the transport unions, very powerful. The trade unions, very, very strong. Remember, I was Deputy Minister of Education. The teacher unions, always engaging with the Education Committee of Parliament. there is hardly anything that we submit to the Committee of Education that the unions will not take exception that they didn't find a copy. They did not receive a copy before we went to committee. And they insist that during the stakeholder consultation, they are invited and they are engaged. But in the case of the youth, what I found out is that there is a yawning gap, a very yawning gap. We don't have strong lobbyists because lobbying is part of the process and lobbying has to be utilized. Elsewhere, lobbying has been regulated and lobbyists get registered. There's a lobbyist register in the United Kingdom, in the United States of America, you know, and lobbyists are known, and you always find in the parliamentary lobby, they are the extra members of parliament. Here, it has not been regulated, and it's one of the reforms that I think we need. We need to legalize lobbying because we cannot pretend it is going on anyway. It is happening, and so in this era of competing needs and it's happening so fast and so quick, you cannot afford to just leave lobbying unregulated because there are sometimes ethical issues that we have to. How far can lobbyists go? Is it appropriate for lobbyists to even facilitate a meeting of members of parliament, say at a workshop in Adan or in Northton? I think that it is time for Ghana to pass legislation that will regularize lobbying. But in the absence of that, that even gives youth organizations and young people in this country room to get active and to engage members of parliament. That is not happening. Recently, the Center for Democratic Development come up with this fantastic program where the young ones in senior high school brought into a government group, and I had the opportunity to engage them when they came to Parliament. And I told them that as young people at the senior high school level, let us hear from you. You can write letters to your mentor. Since I became member of Parliament, I'm in my 6th year, going my 7th year, I have not received a letter from a student, either the university or the senior high school, in my constituency, raising an issue in their school, in their community, except appeal for funds. Except appeal for, as for needs, demands, that one, yes. The direct one, that one, my people write a lot and I love them for that. But it's, you know, I've lost a parent, my parents have lost their jobs, you know, so my last semester, my last year, or I've gained admission, or I have this scholarship, I need a plane ticket. As for that, you get it every day, I believe every hour, if you go to my constituency office. But I'm talking about letters that brings young people to policy issues. For example, I'm concerned about security in our community. I'm concerned about youth unemployment. I'm concerned about my future when I graduate. You know, so as a member of parliament, what are you saying about it? As I'm concerned about even rights that have not yet, that we don't have clarity on as a country, whether we want to remain straight, you know, or the other way, and all of that, all those issues, which are easily engaging the attention of other, you know, youth elsewhere. You don't see our young people write to the member of parliament, visit the member of parliament, come together, form a group, seek an appointment, discuss with us, and say that we want to hear you on the floor on this issue. So I must be sincere that that is one area that you do not get the impression that young people are capitalizing on. Finally, I must say that all the policies that we work on in Parliament, whether they are coming in as bills that we have to pass, or it's an agreement, an international agreement, or a loan, and all of that, there is something called the impact assessment. What will be the impact? So parliamentary committees will always conclude reports on all of these matters before us. lead bills or motions or agreements that this is the impact assessment, this is the stakeholder engagement. The question is, have young people been consulted in that impact assessment? Who carried out the impact assessment? And we are talking about the majority of our population. If more than 60% of our population are below the age 30, then all of these impact assessments that parliamentary committees report on, who are they speaking to? You don't see the demographics, you don't see the breakdown of who has been spoken to. And it is because young people in our country are not demanding that. They are not demanding that they should be spoken to. You know, and always remember that there is an opportunity cost. If you are quiet and you are not actively engaging, others are engaging. And others are making their voices heard. And so they will have their concerns addressed, and it will come to affect you. You know, for example, if you take our State of the Nation addresses, you take our budgets, all the policies that concern the youth, major policies that concern the youth, you do not hear young people even follow timelines. When NAPCO was launched, there was a lot of jubilation. It was a genuine effort, good effort. The president ought to be commended for that innovation because job creation is a big issue, it's a global issue. But timelines were given. How many young people have read the budget and have read the president's speech at the May Day event where he announced that he said by 1st July, the first 10,000 will be engaged and will be in training. Are they in training? We are in August. Young people are quiet, young groups are quiet. During the mid-year review, a major issue like the debt fund and NHIL tax rearrangement. Debt fund is a product of the National Union of Ghana students. I took part in the Mombawa strike in 1998. We mooted the idea of the debt fund. And young people in this country have done many great things that we have to acknowledge. Many great things. Many young people today don't know that national service was an idea by young people. Again, championed by the National Union of Ghana. That is how influential we were. The National Union of Gold Coast students. Our independence as a country. You can't talk about our independent history without the role of the West Africa Students Union, without student activists. You cannot. And then you don't appreciate the history. When the 1992 Constitution came to the voting, young people were invited, were part of the Constituent Assembly. The National Union of Ghana students and SRCs were represented. Nothing could happen in this country in the years of old without the voices of the youth. What has happened? That now you are hardly even considered. It's as if you don't really exist. So get fund, can you imagine? I thought that we would have had some proposal, some presentation from youth groups, from the National Union of Ghana students about the new computation of the get fund. Nothing came. And the get fund has been amended. And I remember get fund, what Harun Idrisu, he was not president at the time, suffered in the Akosombo Accord, where people felt that he had not been hard enough and all of that. I mean, we guarded it so jealously. And we said that for get fund, ring fence the amount. Don't the 2.5% VAT. Make sure it doesn't go to the consolidated fund. It should be protected. That has not been happening. And you groups are quiet. We are not guarding what is ours and what is our creation, what are our babies. So I think that yes, we can blame the current elite, the current leadership, that they have not engaged the youth well enough. But I believe that we can also blame ourselves. Young people should also do an introspection and ask themselves, have they gone to the table and demanded to be heard? There are so many things happening, but today the sad reality is that young people have become too selfish and too inward looking. Once we are comfortable in our homes, our parents are doing well, that's it. Once we live in a nice community, that's it really.
we are not thinking about the others, the vulnerable, the masses out there who need to hear us. And I always relay our statistics when I meet young people, especially educated young people, as I conclude, that those who have university education should remember that the cohorts, those who started class 1, only 17% get to the universities. Every cohort, if you do the trace, only 17%. So our tertiary education system is described as an elitist one. The European Union average is 30%, the United States about 26-27%. But we are still far below 20%. So, as the saying goes, to whom much is given, much is expected. And yes, it's not all which is not as inspiring as the Commonwealth Hall motto. The true stance, the true stance is more inspiring, But on a more serious, we should always remember that there's an honors responsibility on us that we need to carry on, and don't allow anybody to tell you that you are poking your nose or you are punching above your weight. I mean, how dare they? It is not true. It's not the case. I mean, you are only asking for what you deserve. And if we ruin this country, those of us in leadership today, we leave it behind for you. And you are going to pick up the mess. And if it's too messy and too broken, you may not be able to fix it. So you have an equal say. Just like all of those others who are in the more organized, unions or organizations or associations. So let us see you more, come engage us more in Parliament, and hopefully we will be able to achieve a lot for the young people of Parliament. Thank you very much.
We're going to do the last round of questions, but I'll just be related. So I'll, at this juncture, open the forum up for at least 1, 2, or 3 questions from participants to the panel. Yes.
Hello everyone. My name is Akondokia, and I want to channel this question to whoever is elected. Okay, I'm also lucky, and I'm currently a master's student of gender peace and security at the Parliamentary. I want to ask how you feeling currently sitting among or sitting beside 4 men at a table.
Very friendly.
Yes, I want to ask her how she's feeling currently. Currently you are the one. Yes, so I want to go from there how she's feeling as the only woman amongst the men. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel. For me, one of the things that have weakened how active young people can become is how we have allowed politics to enter student activity. You talk about the days of notes whereby people thought about the nation and what was good for the country. But now I'm also a product of the University of Ghana. Even floor elections, this one is MP, this one is MP. And so I was having a conversation with Akonobia. We have a friend, my roommate in level 100. He's now on radio station speaking for his party every day. As young as you are, why don't you develop yourself, build capacity? Because I am a living testimony. As young as I am, I'm called as an economist to come and speak on issues. I believe that capacity building, there is no alternative to that. And I believe that the way we have allowed ourselves as young people to let partisan politics enter every facet of our life, I think it's a very big challenge. And if this continues, in the next 5-10 years, I don't know what will become of our country. And that's what I'm passionate about. People that I was in the same hall with, we went to the same senior high school, we were in the same university. If they are now in there talking about everything is about party. They don't even think about their nation anymore. And it worries me as a young man. And I ask myself, so what will become of us in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years? That is my comment. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mao. Very direct. You know, in Ghana, just like he asked, it's either you are NPP or NDC. Let's be very frank and brutally honest about it. Mr. Baba, do you think to be a change maker, maybe you want to work in international development, do you how should you align yourself with any of these two parties, which are the obvious parties which will be in power for hopefully the next 20 years? Yeah, let's be very real. I want a very brutal answer. How should you go about with it when you know deeply within you care so much about Ghana than party colors? Like, what do you think on that? Thank you.
Okay, so 3 questions. We'll take 2 more, 5, and then that's it. Then we'll do the wrapping up. Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to know the practical steps Parliament has taken to incorporate young people in their committee meetings and things that are day-to-day running of the Parliament to enable us learn advocates of growth in practice of parliamentary matters.
Thank you very much. My name is Benedicta. I want to find out how accessible are honorable members here, especially with regards to issues that are affecting our communities, because Honorable Kujito was talking about people writing letters to him. Sometimes you ask to see an MP and you be asked to come back for like 5 months, 6 months. You book an appointment and you never get to meet them. And we are talking about meeting them to talk about issues that are affecting us. How accessible are you?
Because of time, let's take the answers. So let's begin with the question for Honorable Zanato. The issue of how do you feel sitting in the midst of 4 other?
I think the men are keen to answer this question for me. Actually, I hadn't actually really thought about it. They're colleagues and senior members who I learn from, and we share ideas all the time. And for me, I think that was why I made that comment earlier on regarding the fact that I've never really thought of one of the things that limits me as being a woman. And it's something that I've been forced to keep in mind because it's a real issue. But if you say pampered, we'll take it like that. If I can just perhaps make a contribution as well regarding the issue of partisanship. Please, what's your name again? You have made my day. You have really, really made it. Because this is an issue that actually disturbs my soul, if I have to be honest. You see, because if we are willing to put Ghana second, and it's always about partisanship, then what are we doing all of this for? Surely we have different ideals at the core of our various parties, but ultimately it should be about Ghana. And I think that in the midst of all of that, it does get lost. And I'm so glad to hear you say this, and I really hope that you can have more voices in unison so that Parliament will hear what you're saying, so that the executive will hear what you're saying, because then it starts to filter from the bottom up, and that kind of groundswell is hard to fight against, so that we can have our little differences on partisan issues, but when it comes to issues that are of national importance, we can be mature enough to put that aside. And I also wish that perhaps this partisanship thing would actually be perhaps moved a little bit out of the tertiary level so that people can think together as a unit, as Ghanaians first. You know, if at that level where you are supposed to be the ones guiding us, you know, the tertiary level is supposed to be that young intellectual level that's supposed to be supplying new ideas to the governance and everything. If at that level you're already divided not on principle but on partisanship, then already there's a broken front. before we can even think together as one. So I'm really happy about that, because I've heard that comment with regards to nudes now becoming, there's the NDC nudes now and the NPP nudes now. It's sad, and I'm so happy to hear you say this. So I think for me that is something we need to look at really, really closely, and I'm so glad that we're all here. I'm always fighting with Oko because I call him propaganda minister. He's always on radio, and I say, Oko, our integrity is important, and we must always defend issues on principle and see if somewhere in the midst of that we create a little bit of a distance with partisan issues sometimes. You know, obviously he needs to retain his seat, so he needs to be head jumping in the polls, right?
He didn't know that was a fatal blow.
We're speaking about real issues here, and I think Sami, was very frank in his presentation. And I think if we can all aim to have these frank conversations, I think that in itself will be a starting point for where we can go to build together with young people.
Okay, Your Honor, I have two questions for you. On partisanship and alignment, if you want to pursue professional course as in career, and then there's also the issue of the disintegrated youth funds, i.e. partisanship, and the moves and decisions. Thank you, sir.
Let me commend you for these very insightful questions. The issue of partisan politics. Let us agree that partisan politics does not mean politics without conscience or politics without the national interest. I don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. Just as some people finish school and they decide that they want to have an international career, they want to work in an international organization, probably want to work with the World Bank, work with the United Nations. Some people also finish school and they decide that I want to go help my constituency. I want to be an assembly member, or be a unit committee member, or be a district chief executive, or a member of parliament. I don't think that any of them are less human, less Ghanaian, or less healthy. What is important at the end of the day is that you should pursue your politics based on principle, on integrity, and in the national interest. So I have no problem with those who have graduated with you and want to help the parties on radio and television. Let's face it, that's also an important part of political organization that has to be done. Who will do it? And who will keep Duke and go and City FM, give them resource persons for us to listen? It's all good for our political development, for national development. But what is important, my brothers and sisters, is that don't sell your soul to the devil. I keep telling people that since I was drafted into national politics, I was drafted right after my youth presidency. A very great godfather called me, Uncle Atuaho, said, look, we've been following you, monitoring your news presidency. I mean, we think we want you on our side. I must admit that there were calls from the NPP side as well, but I decided to go with the NDC side. Why did I go with the NDC side? It was ideological. The challenge in our politics is that many of our young people don't know why they want to join the NPP or the NDC and why they want to pursue national politics. First of all, it should be ideological. You should be motivated by wanting to leave a legacy, wanting to leave your constituency better, your nation better than you met it. If you come to my constituency today, I'm the youngest MP North Tongue has ever produced, but I'm not bragging. Just go there, ask anybody from North Tongue. The chiefs called a grand debat and installed me Togbe of the Jeep.
The embassy will tell you what that means. Means the chief who keeps his word. All the promises I made to the people, I kept it. Tomorrow is my birthday. I'm spending the day with them. I'm donating an ambulance to the Joapon Health Center, and you'll see it in the news. And I'm happy with the impact I'm making. I have joy in what I am doing. I have not deceived the people or swindled them. What I told them I would do, I will do. If you don't have the passion for something, don't do it. Let someone else who has the passion and who wants to leave a mark get in and do it. But you see, there's too much of politics without principle, politics without ideological foundation, and that is the problem. If you look at Article 55 of our Constitution, which talks about political parties. 55.1 says the right to form political parties is hereby guaranteed. 2 says every citizen of Ghana of voting age has the right to join a political party. You have the right, once you're 18 years and above, you have the right. So if I come here and submit to you that I would advise you that wait till you are 40 or till you are 50, or go and build capacity in other areas. What about political capacity? Once you are building your capacity, which is important, in economics, in law, in medicine, in finance, somebody has to govern the country. And very soon the capacity you have built will be needed. Like Dr. Baumia was building capacity, Canada and all over the place. The MPP at the point had need of him. He is now the vice president, chairman of the economic management team, and he's helping the nation build. So some have to hold the fort. I feel very strongly about this matter. There are some people who, sometimes you tune into radio stations and then you hear people criticizing young people in national politics. And they say they haven't even worked before. The political work that the youth are engaged in, is that not work? How are we defining work? So, yeah, if you decided that you want to go and teach at Abokobi earlier, so you are working, you are also paid from the taxpayer. I just left the Ministry of Education. I know there are 350,000 teachers on the payroll, the public payroll. You have to pay them every month. All of us are taxes pay you. Somebody went into national politics, either at the district level or constituency level or in national politics. And some way, somehow, we have to deride that person, and that person does not have genuine intentions. So I take a different view. Now, if you look at how I advise that there's no time, so I would advise that we spend time and look at Article 55 of our Constitution. Article 55 of our Constitution enjoins all political parties to be national in character, to come up with ideas for social and economic transformation. Read Article 55.3. That's what our politics should be about. It shouldn't be about insults. It shouldn't be about attacking each other. So the problem is not with, for example, look at what is happening in the United States of America. Look, I just need 2 minutes.
We have to.
I just need 2 minutes.
So you can say wrap up without any issues.
I'm running up.
So that we can
Yes.
take Dr.
Sure. I'm running up in 2 minutes. These are matters I'm passionate about. Take what is happening in the United States of America now. The suspicion that Russia may have interfered with their 2016 elections. Democrats, Republicans agree that foreign interference in their election is a no-no. There is a joint congressional effort to probe it. There is the Mueller Committee probing it. And the American interest is put first. There you don't see the Republican-Democratic divide. You see even Republicans take on President Trump, that when he met President Putin recently and attacked the American establishment, he had to recant and apologize for his statements. So the point is that let the national interest, let principle Let integrity guide us. And let us have ideological foundations. Why do you belong to a social democratic party on the left of center? Why do you belong to a right-wing MPP, the right of center? Those are the fundamental issues. And let's conduct our politics to make a difference, to make an impact. Look, you can be young and make an impact. You can be very old after you think that you may have built capacity in whatever and still be a disaster. It's given the opportunity. So it's not really about your age. Finally, notes and the divisions, the partisanship that we have allowed to infiltrate. It is not for anything that in the loose constitution, right from the preamble, notes is apolitical. All our student unions are supposed to be apolitical. When you talk to my peers, my mates, there's some who tell you that when I was in student politics, they suspect I was MPP. There's another strong group that will tell you they suspect I was NDC. And that's how beautiful it is. I will go to TESCOM meetings and campaign there, go to day meetings and campaign there. I don't think that there is anything wrong with having, that's why I disagree with my big sister, that I don't think we should take out the pays and TESCOMs from our campuses. We should, I already understand. Okay. You mean, okay, I probably didn't understand you, I'm sorry. So what we need to do is a good grooming ground, because all these are political parties. Don't have party schools where we can, groom young people. If you read Tony Blair's book, you will notice that he had been discovered right from his school days, and they groomed him. Obama said, if you read the latest book on him, The Rising Star, I was surprised to find out that he had been identified and groomed. Our political parties are not doing that very well over here. You must focus on the interest of students, not partisan interest that is not based on principle, that sells out your constituency. And when you do that, I'm just running out. When you do that, you are even respected. You are respected more by your party people, because they say that this guy had principle. When he was Luke's president, we wanted him to sacrifice the student interest and push our agenda. He refused. You have more credibility and more respect when you do that. Thank you very much.
You would have that. You have the last statement. 10 seconds.
I was referring to
Okay, so Dr. Nafo, the practical steps to ensure deeper engagement. The same question will go Dr. Anida, then we can quickly wrap up.
Just straight to the point. Indeed, the legislative process is like a loop and has various channels for feedback and also engagement. And as I made my comment initially, I said that it is either we, the youth, we are not aware of the processes, or we are disinterested in engaging. These are some of the things, the little things you can do. Honorable Kudeto suggested a lot of them. The first point of call for you to engage in the legislative process is your MP. And I know that most of you here are from various constituencies. You cannot live in Ghana without being in a constituency. So the first point of call is your MP. And the MPs themselves have various tools at their disposal in Parliament to champion any issue that you want to raise. They can do it through question, they can do it through statements, they can raise private members' motion, they can do it through bills, because when even bills come to the floor and you are not in agreement with any article of it, you can submit it to your MP, who will force an amendment through the legislative process. The youth can also go through this process through submissions. If there is an issue and they refer it to a committee, you can make submissions to a committee, any of the committees, and a written submission and it will be taken on board. At times, some of the issues will come and the committee itself will request for memoranda from the public. Those are things you can take advantage of. Write your memoranda, submit it to the committee, and your views will be championed. Another issue is you can go through a petition process, and if you take our standing orders, we have a channel where a member of the public or any youth here with an issue can go through a petition that, indirectly through your MP, and it will be taken on the floor. A motion will be moved for it to be debated. But we also, as managers of the parliamentary process, I'm here with my ranking member on the Committee on Foreign Affairs and my honorable members here. And Dr. Aguinago also taught me political science. You see, and as managers of the parliamentary process, we, the technocrats, what we see is normally when issues come, yes, we hear the members' side, their viewpoint. We hear those who are interested in it, maybe associations, if they are traders or whatever. But as Honorable Okuyetu said, the youth, we don't hear anything, even if it is on youth issues. We have committee, the youth on committee, Youth Sports Committee in Parliament, and they deal with youth issues. And if you go to the committee secretariat, you don't knock on their doors, nothing. You see, so you should get interested in some of these things, and if you mobilize support and all that, your issues will get into the agenda setting, and it will get into the legislative process, and everything will be okay. So be more interested in engaging with Parliament. Although the processes there, you will think is limited, but if you start engaging and knocking on the doors, the few channels which is there, I think the managers of the process will ensure that the engagement issues is increased so that you get more time and to engage in the process. So this is what I will say for now. And the debate will continue. There are other processes you can do. Even Parliament has a website now. Our proceedings are streamlined on Facebook, and you can, members have Twitter accounts, some of them Facebook accounts. If you want them to answer some of the questions, you can go to their page, you can chat with them, and then some of the issues that you want addressed will be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nafo, Dr. Aguinago.
Thank you very much. Sometimes when you do live classes, you forget about your students. Sometimes you are not able to or make them out. But I know them very well. You see, I was telling you that I pay my dues to this country. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm proud of my products. Well, I started very young, you understand, so I still have a lot of years ahead of me. Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The discussions have been very engaging, very deep. I remember Obama saying in 2008 that ideas matter. When Hillary was saying that he was talking to Matt, he said ideas what matter. So we need to talk, we need to engage ourselves. The resources are there, but if you don't have the ideas, you undermine the state. So it is important. 61 years of nationhood. We need a lot. We have to still get out of the woods. Critical things that I will highlight, because he mentioned a lot of things that you can do to engage the system, to engage the parliament. And for nukes and politics, where I have a paper on it, and I have argued that student leadership is almost useless now. Because of we used to have the popular sport, you know that, in front of central cafeteria. Now the students don't even meet. They have privatized all their JCRs, so they don't even meet to discuss anything. And I get worried. I was one of the deputy senior tutors of Lagos Hall, so I know, and I have a whole paper on it together with some of my colleagues. So at that level, you need to be prepared to engage and learn and build capacity. So politics is important. You see, it's not for nothing that the Greeks felt that politics is referred to as affairs of the state.
But that is the original meaning of politics, the affairs of the state. And that cannot be demonized. It is excessive partisanship which may be problematic, but we need to engage in politics. Now if you go back to the Greeks, again, Plato has said that the price you pay for not participating in politics is that you are going to live under the government of fools. He said that is certain, you surely will live under the government of fools. So for me, if elections are taking place in my bedroom, I'll put in appearance and vote, because it has implications for my survival in that bedroom. Now I agree with the Honorable that doing party work is important. You see, mass parties must be mobilized, must be nurtured. We need to have strong parties that will hold our government in check. So that even when there's one ruling, there must be some who are also credible in waiting. And that will put a check on the one who is ruling. You understand? When you know that the one who is waiting has credibility and has the capacity, you set up. And when government set up, you and I will be the beneficiaries. So it's important. So parties will mobilize, they will train leaders, they will articulate concerns, they will aggregate interest, they will serve as checks on executive, among others. They perform effective opposition. That's critical for development. You understand? Very critical, very loyal opposition. In Britain, they call them loyal opposition. So even when they have lost elections, they will wait because they know tomorrow is another day. I tell some people that today's majority can be tomorrow's minority. I mean, go back to the Fourth Republic, just the Fourth Republic. In 1992, when I entered the gun with Attack and others, in the parliament, it was almost like NDC had 189. And then 11 others. In 1996, it came out to 133. By the year 2000, the tables had 10. 2004, 2008. 2008, the tables 10 again. 2012, 2016, the tables 10 again. So we have had 3 power alternations. So today's majority can be tomorrow's minority. So positions are not possessions. You see, and I like the discussions when you say that if we are not a powerful group. You see, in public policy making, policies move in the direction of powerful groups. And if they are moving in the direction of powerful groups, what are they doing? They are also moving away from less powerful groups. So if you think that you can't be bothered, some people say can't go, we can't, if you can't be bothered, the tendency is that the public policies will move away from you. And that is why it is an imperative, a democratic imperative, that those who are affected by a decision must have a way of influencing the decision. So by engagement, what capacity are you building, for instance? Because you need to know what is it that you need to engage. And be able, when you make sense, people will listen to you. Nobody will disregard you when they know that you know what you are talking about and you are making a statement. So the nurturing is important. I was in class in level 300 in Legon when my Bokeh, came to class, the current speaker, and he said he wanted a class prefect. Everybody was sitting down, and then what I've seen is that a number of the youth don't want responsibilities. You park your car, they all run away. Nobody wants to watch it. But when I was a young guy, I was washing my brothers and my uncle's cars like that. So now when you see my car, ask them, sometimes they ask me whether I drive the car apart from campus. Because always neat, because I have learned an art. Service, what capacity? So I volunteered in that class that I wanted to be the class president. And that is what gave me visibility to win the post of president, hands down, because I was known. Hands down, and then eventually. So wherever we find ourselves, we'll be leaders. I went to Achimota School, the first PTA meeting I attended, they voted for me as the vice president of the Achimota PTA. So I'm Achimota PTA, but except that I don't know how I can influence admissions. every meeting we go, you make a statement and they want to make you a leader. Yesterday I attended the meeting, they said I should chair. I said, but the other people if you chair, they said no, chair, you can chair. So leadership is important. So we prepare to learn, and then you'll be able to deal with the key things. Let me just end by saying that the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, I was, just before I came, I looked at our strategic plan for the year. And I was, even before I was appointed, because I was hinted, I tried to understand how they were drafting their strategic plan for the year. And I made some input. What I have indicated in the strategic plan will be the youth and women. And it's in the plan. So what I'm going to do, for instance, you are going to be targets because it's there. It's in there. This is what you call it. And I was asked to defend some supplementary budget which are dead. And they gave me 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes, the finance minister says, I'll give you the money. You understand? It's a capacity planning. So 10 minutes, what are you putting into the 10 minutes? I have sat on several interviews with the youth. Somebody will say that, why should I employ you? 5 minutes. And I tell people that you haven't given me any reason to make sure that you are going to be employed or to recommend that you should be employed. So what are you going to put in the 10 minutes that you are given? Training. So we are going to roll out programs that will help you engage in Parliament because it is now starting. And so look forward to that.
Yes, so Dr. Koba had the last bite, and that was it for this session. Let me say that there was a different approach to develop apps. I'm still learning to be very social media environment. And I think it's a wonderful tool for engaging the youth in terms of interaction between MPs and their constituents, on the youth especially. Imagine you can download the app of your MP and you can see his programs, follow his, you can put questions there and answer them. So I think it's one of the things you can write to your MP, even if difficult to see or help this kind. Just write it, let the other people write it, try and get this app which is being developed. It is one for it. The other one also, we have, I think the standard 71 allows you to make speeches on community days and special events. So on youth days and all that, or things that have to do with the youth, I think if you are part of any civil society that pushes youth programs or youth focus, you can make sure that you approach especially youth MPs or youth MPs in Parliament for us to make a speech, and you can come to the gallery so that when you know you are going to have fiscal representation around, you normally speak to speaker, things are working in the background, and then the impact can be felt, and then the force can be strong, and you can push the policy and all that. The other thing you also must look at, I read the invitation where there was a suggestion that I never really suggested that I have a committee for youth affairs or something, or the materials I got. But we have a committee on youth sports and culture. So what happened is that, and when I pick my book, I have a book on high blood pressure. But when you study high blood pressure, in black people, this is not like the black. It applies to all, but I try to focus. If you are youth bias, the first question you ask yourself is that, so how is the trend in those 15 years to less than 40? So there can be the youth agenda in the Better Ghana agenda, which is passed. And there can be the youth agenda in the Ghana Beyond 8 agenda. So all I'm trying to say is that in whatever program you come across, the first question is that what is the youth agenda? So if on the health committee, I realize that a lot of the issues coming before us are not youth sensitive or youth biased. The first question I can ask my chairman is that, do you have any issues with youth at all? So you don't need to have an isolated youth committee, but you can push that for every committee. There should be a youth subcommittee on youth affairs, so that for health, nutrition, I mean those who are children biased will come and ask the health committee, what programs do you have that support nutrition? When they go to legal and constitutional control on legal and parliamentary constitutional affairs or what, they go like, okay, what bills or tools are you looking at that is focused on children? So that's one thing. Now, so the youth agenda in whatever you come across, that's how you start looking for how to keep youth out. And then let me talk about the MPP stuff, where we said floor elections, if you have this, and I made a funny statement to talk that it is politics decentralized. But on a more serious note, where we need to get to is to come to the place where, when I meet you, even in our greetings after having asked you, oh, you are a boy, I guess you are from Accra, powerful, I mean, I'm also Italian. But what team do you support? He said, I'm a House of Folk fan. And what about politics? I'm a, and the smile is even bigger. Where the party you belong is not seen as a barrier to relating to each other. But it is only one of the things that identifies you to a group, just as you can be a member of the golf club, or you can be a member of the Ghana Bar Association, or Medical Association. But when it comes to choosing the floor president, after having mentioned you support us of food,
you like KK like myself, and you're from Accra. Now let's talk about floor issues. So what is your plan for the floor in the next 1 year? So what has been your experience with 7 people? And if you're a team and I have a very bad temper, how do you manage it? If you have issues and you don't have any plan, my brother, and I'm also in the house of food and also with them people. But for this floor, you are a danger to us because you are not. So we must come to the place where our decision and judgment is not based on the person's orientation, but it's on the capacity and the need for that particular work which is attacked. So it is, in fact, that's how nice democracy is. Looking at the other side of that, I wish we come to the place where even at the JSS, a child can tell you, I am a Democrat, or I'm a conservative, I'm a MP. Knowing what it takes to make people, oh, we are capitalists, we are center-right. So what it means is that we believe that you should work and get your money. On 3-4 good cars, and have a conscience to help the poor. So that the child who also says, oh, my family, we are center and left. I'm NDC. Why? We believe that, like Cuba, everybody should always be the same. We should not have too many rich people. And you can't fault somebody for having such one in mind. So it is a danger when you identify someone with a party color, but there's no know why those colors are there. But if the person knows why, it is healthy. But beyond that, let's look at the issues. I think that is the way to go. And party vehicles, somebody said, oh, I wish to go to school, but this NDC people, you see, whether you like it or not, there are 2 vehicles, hopefully we'll get 3 or 4, which drive to the junior half. And it is in these 3 or whatever 2 vehicles that you can help your nation. So if you have a motive to help, then ideologies, pick one. But when you are in the bus, make sure that your conscience is speaking. Your personal principles are speaking. I'll give you an example. I go on air. They give us some guidelines. Oh, these are the goals on this issue. What I mean, I absorb, but it's not everything I assimilate. There are two things. They enter the brain, but in terms of what I accept, it's not all. So they'll tell me this is the line. But when I speak, I bring in my integrity issues, my principles, and what I think beyond the line that we are doing. When you do that, people are comfortable to say, I am MVP or I belong to the Ghana Beyond Age agenda.
Thank you. So that's how we will draw now the curtain on today's discussion, this workshop, and thoughts on improved youth engagement and involvement in the legislative process. I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed the discussions, the insights, and we're working our way better people further equipped and sharper to contribute to national development. Benedicta and Richardson put together a final presentation, but we want to volunteer to help them put together number 2 because a lot has been said. Thank you very much.
This is how all you
Yes, I wanted to positively discuss for all of us. Morris is Morris. Do I have that dispensation?
Yeah, positive.
Positive discrimination. Look.
So I'm agenda SDG 5.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's something that we actually need to do a little bit more, just to encourage a lot more. I think that I'd really like to commend all the contributors on the panel, as well as those who made suggestions and asked questions, because the thing about having a group discussion is we learn from one another, and that's the beauty. I just wish we'd had more time so that we could have heard a lot more of what you have to offer, because it's opportunities like these that bring something that may be in our blind side that we can take with us to the house and then perhaps be better at what we do. So I guess my recommendation or my hope is that perhaps in future, if we could have a little bit more time for the attendees as well to contribute, because what they have to say is what we can take back with us and then, be better and to at least, convey what their concerns all are. The other thing as well is I think that in going forward, perhaps some of the things that you could think about as members of various youth groups as well is the fact that is the hybrid system that we have helping us or harming us as a nation. The hybrid system being that the Constitution mandates that there's a specific number of appointees on the executive that must come from Parliament. Is it hampering our ability to have a proper oversight role over the executive? Because the reality is, if you're picked as a minister and you're an MP, and our primary role, one of our primary roles, is to, watch the purse and oversight of the executive, and you've been appointed by the executive to be a minister, how do you take a position against something that the executive has brought in without fear of losing your job, for example? Which means that you're likely to be less vocal about an issue that you feel strongly about. So these are some of the very real issues that are important for us to look at. We have in the pipeline is a constitutional review and everything, but the youth has to take a real interest in some of these things, because when we do this, as we were talking about youth and so on, and I was hearing the below 40. I turned 40 this year. I don't know where the 40 is at. My youth, oh my God. But these things are important. When we talk about future leaders, I don't see future leaders in this. I see leaders. Future leaders are the ones in secondary school and whatever else, primary school. But you are the leaders. And we happen to be those in a position to represent you at this point in time. But it doesn't mean that this could not be you tomorrow. It could easily be. It's actually a matter of choice. And I would perhaps at this point encourage the women here to brave the storm a little bit and ask Duke perhaps to be an advocate so that the media will, for the media to perhaps be, you're supposed to be the forefront.
Yes.
Be relying on you to sanitize the landscape a little bit more. So that as, somebody was saying, the issue of throwing insults at each other and denigrating people in the name of politics, you perhaps are in a beautiful position to help to regulate that a bit more. Where if I come onto a show and you're interviewing me and I start going down the path of personalizing an issue and starting to insult someone, you perhaps take the opportunity to say, we have a policy over here. We don't engage in this kind of, exactly. In other words, and I think when the media starts to take that kind of a position, it helps to bring people in line in a very nice way where we start to recognize what's an acceptable way to interact with one another. But the children are learning from what we do. And that is what they have come to see as what politics is, or politics are, which not really should be the case. We can disagree without insulting one another, without destroying one another, or, making libelous statements. So for me, I think I would also appeal to the media to take this role very seriously because it helps to guide this issue of ethical leadership that I raised. So I'd like to just once again say thank you so very much on behalf of the panelists here. Since you gave me the opportunity to speak last, I must say thank you, and thank you all for your time as well.
That's your final round of applause for you. So we will take a group photograph right here. Yes, the chairs have been prepared for our panelists to stand, and the photographers will do the arrangement to take the pictures. I'm sure if you want to better engage them, we will come back later. Thank you.